Welcome to In the Flow, where we explore how marketing leaders leverage operations to eliminate chaos and capture opportunity. I'm Anthony Welgemoed, CEO of Ziflow. Welcome to today's episode. Our guest today went from journalist to software engineer to CMO, and now he's building an AI company that might make the traditional CMO role obsolete. We get into why modern CMOs are constantly on the defensive, why most AI marketing tools are just noise, and why real product-grounded differentiation may be the last unfair advantage left. If you care about where marketing leadership is headed in an AI native world, this conversation is for you. Welcome to the pod, Madhukar. It's really great to have you here today.
Thank you, Anthony, and very nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great. So we both software guys, we both come from software engineering. I'd love to just, get a bit of background, how you went from journalist to software engineering, CMO, and now founder. You don't see that trajectory too often. Be great to just get your story.
Yeah, I joke about how I go from one field to the other. I become mediocre, and before people find out, I jump into something else. So I actually started off, like you said, as a journalist. I used to work for Hindustan Times back in Delhi. And around that time, the World Wide Web happened. I figured out a way how to make web pages. One thing led to the other, and I came to the US to do both my master's in mass comm, but also teach web design because it was unique at that time. Ended up doing my master's in software engineering as well. In fact, my thesis was on multi-agent software engineering back in 2002. So from there, went on to become a full-time software engineer, stayed in the East Coast for a little bit, and then came to the Bay Area. And once I got into the Bay Area, I was in the tech space for last 20 years. And in that place, I went from being an engineer to being a product manager to running product strategy at Oracle for customer experience to then becoming product marketing and then ultimately a chief marketing officer. So in my mind, the common thread is that I still love to build stuff, whether it's in writing, a medium, or whether it's using software or even videos for that matter. Kind of always been the common thread that moved me over from all the way from, writing to software engineering and now to being a builder for marketing product.
And how do you feel like, that sort of that technical background has helped you, from being a CMO? Because that's quite interesting. You don't see a lot of software engineers go from software engineering to the CMO role. And I'll be honest, for me, a previous software company I had with my co-founder, I was a CTO. And then with Ziflow, I stepped into the CEO role. And then, so now you're like responsible for so, it's always one of those things when when you're in software engineering, you're like, yeah, I can do this and I can write this product and go sell it, if you work for someone. But once you're on the sales and marketing end, you go like, all right, this is not as like clear cut as like you write code, it either works or there's a bug and it doesn't work. So how do you feel like that? How did you like manage with that shift going from like the engineering side to being a CMO? And how did that help you make you better as a CMO?
Yeah, so I found myself in companies like Redis or which were very or liaison, which were very highly technical, and their audiences were developers. And being a developer myself, I used to code. I've been coding forever, ever since, even when I was in product marketing and even as a CMO. I always found that talking to other developers came easily to me because I understood the product and often used the product. I was a user and a buyer for a number of different products, like including Redis as well as single store and so on. And I noticed that one of the biggest issues within marketing was a lot of marketers are really, really good at the mechanics of marketing. They can do CRO, they can do analytics to do CAC and then ROAS and all of that. But oftentimes, especially in the technical world, you're not really connected to what that product is. And that leads to a lot of what I would say random acts of marketing.
Mm.
So that was one thing that I wanted to, bridge that. And so I found myself in more of the developer centric tech companies where I could use the product, I could talk about it and come up creatively with ideas on how to go and generate awareness. The second thing was just my, call it whatever you want, the ability and the desire to always have my hands on the keyboard. So when I was jumping around, or if somebody said, hey, this thing is not in Marketo yet, or we don't know what that attribution is, I would find myself writing a Python script or just getting into the product, say, let me show you. And then, I would try and automate it. So those are the kind of things that kind of led me deeper and deeper into this intersection zone between technology and creativity.
Attribution can be hard at times, but I find like if you look at the product marketing side of it, and let's just keep brand out of it, I find like the
Mhm.
product marketing can be quite tricky for most CMOs and most VP of marketing. How did you do you feel like maybe that journalism background helped you in terms of, or the engineering background helped you like to position a product, because it is very different, as you said, it's a lot of random acts, and product marketing is like bringing it all together, right?
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, a lot of that is now changed and still changing with AI. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But product marketing to me was really being the interpreter between the product management team and your end user. And the outcome of that often would be things like the website page update. It could be talking to Gartners and the Foresters of the world because you're doing the same thing. It's talking to the sales team and doing the exact same thing. And so to me, that was kind of the sweet spot because I could understand the product, I could use it, I could talk to the users in their language. And then because over a period of time, I was also on a lot of business side, I could translate that or interpret that for the other audience. So from that perspective, the product marketing kind of came as a natural thing. And then once I was in product marketing, it was like, oh, but somebody is doing demand generation. And I was like, what is demand generation? Well, you're going to actually go get the leads. But in order to go get the leads, you have to communicate with them, whether it's through email or through ads or whatever it is. And to me, that again was a natural fit with what you do in product marketing. Because if you're not telling the right story and if you're not really connecting with the end user, without having that empathy of the end user, then everything kind of feels flat and disconnected. So that's kind of how it all, came together.
And so, we know this the whole CMO role, it's getting harder every year. The 10 years feel like it's getting shorter. You being a CMO, for you, what was the biggest pain point when you were doing that job, that role?
I joke with people that the average shelf life of a CMO is roughly about a year and 7 months. And the first thing that any CMO does is they come in and they change the brand on the website. That takes about 8, 9 months. And then you are suddenly pulled into things like attribution and pipeline metrics if you're in B2B, which is my background. And then all of a sudden things go from one end to the other. And people have opinions about the website. They have opinions about the logo and the color. And you're also managing your demand generation, which is more of a science, and the other part is more of an art as well as influence. So, as a CMO, you're actually juggling 3 or 4 different jobs, but you end up not really doing those jobs. You end up managing teams and systems. Like there is a brand team, and that brand team, you're trying to teach them the art of storytelling, the art of, communication. Those are the fundamentals, but you have to ground it with the brand of identity as well as the product. Similarly, you're trying to do, demand generation. And within that, the communication part still exists, but now you're also more grounded in the data. Like, did you reach out to the right segments? Did it have the right amount of conversion on? And, which part of that entire process is leaky and how you're going to do A/B testing. And ultimately, it's one of these jobs that get you. Right? Uh, One of those jobs is not desirable to the rest of the company or externally, or it has high visibility and people have opinion and you are not able to influence it. But the most common pitfall, as you would know, of course, is the attribution thing.
Yeah.
And it's been an eternity of going around doing the exact same things where you go to a sales team and there are different sales teams. So it's not to say that it's exactly the same everywhere. But the sales team, the marketing team will get the leads for them, they work it, and then they close the deal and they go to President's Club. Now, when there is no pipeline or when they are not able to close it, a lot of that discussion shifts to the CMOs, like, where's the pipeline? And so the CMO then gets defensive, or the marketing team is like, hey, we are bringing top the funnel and MQL, and that's not really converting. And then the sales team would be like, yeah, but those are not really good leads. And these deals that I closed, I actually had relationships with them 3 years ago. So now you get into this really weird zone where you're not up against different teams because you're trying to do attribution. And I've been in teams where people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to go buy tools like Visible because they're just trying to do attribution. And to me, that's like a fool's errand. It doesn't matter where the revenue came from as long as the company got that revenue. So whether it's sales or whether it's marketing who got it should not drive a bunch of decisions around finance. And then the last part I would also say is the finance part, which is, typically there is some sort of a heuristic on how much you spend on marketing. And it's usually a percentage of your revenue. And then within that, you decide how much goes into programs versus headcount. And there's always that tension with the finance team and the CFO because they are constantly looking to say, you put out a billboard that cost $300,000. Show me how that led to $1 million deal that we closed this quarter. And you were like, yeah, the CTO was passing by. He told me that he saw it and that's how he called up. But that's not attribution. So these are very intangible constructs of what I would almost say of really basic human influence and communication that gets to you. And that's primarily driven by a lot of, nodes that the CMO ends up talking to.
So do you think this CMOs are actually getting a bit of a hard time because, let's say 1 year, 7 months, 2 years, there's a turnover of a CMO. Do you think it's like a little bit unfair on the CMO role? Because yeah, it is super hard to do the attribution. It's one of those things where it's hard to put, marketing's got to do so many things and you've got to have them all going the whole time, but you can't always people like you we know people have to see the company's content out there 4, 5, 6 times before they go, okay, I'm gonna go and look at
Yeah.
it. So do you think it's a bit unfair on
I
CMOs?
think it's part of the territory. I think this is the role that people sign up for when they sign up to become a CMO. You're actually signing up for three different jobs. So to me, I think um, that's not an out, so to speak. So having said that, though, I do think that with AI, this role is going to morph, and especially in smaller organizations, this is going to go away. And we are already seeing that because it used to be that the CMO in a larger team, like I had teams of 41 people, and all you're doing is you're in meetings and you're trying to, once you have a strategy, which comes down from the board and brainstorming with the exec team, then you're trying to do is you're managing people and teams, and you're trying to ensure that people are implementing your strategy. And that's where your chief of staff comes in. Now you have three layers of communication with the team. So you're not really actually doing something. And so when the team is smaller, what you end up doing is, and I've done this in smaller companies, you write the copy, you write the press release. And if you're really, really good, then you're actually touching the product and you're influencing how the sign up flow works. What does the text and the label look like when somebody gets an email? So that is what AI has done or is doing in smaller companies, where people who are closer to the product already, that could be the founder, that could be the head of product, they now have the tools to actually go and tell that story directly to the end user and customer. So that has compressed in terms of the number of communication, your vision from your product to the actual story. Now, at the higher level, I do feel that will morph into something, I don't know what, where one person would be able to do a lot more. You don't really need a chief of staff. You can get the analytics now talking to your phone or just talking to your OpenClaw assistant. You can get not just analytics, but recommendations, and you can go and implement it on your own too to a certain level, and then let the 10% be by the other humans with the taste. So that's how I feel about how this role has changed and is already changing.
Yeah, and one of the things you've mentioned before is like, potentially the CMO role could go away and, at, in certain stages. How do you think that would it be these AI tools replacing it, or how do you see this sort of
For
evolving?
example, in very small startups, today you can use things like Claude or Claude Code to not only generate content, but you can create ad campaigns. You can create ad creatives. And Remember that there used to be a time, barely a few months ago, where there are teams working on the design, teams working on the SEO research, and then are teams working on the content side. And then you're bringing it all together because the CMO is kind of now managing all that. So now imagine if a lot of that is compressed and somebody can do that on their own. It's kind of what's happening with software engineering. Your designers used to do certain things, the engineer used to do certain things, and the PM used to do certain things. Now the designer can do a lot of what PM could do, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And the same thing with engineering. So it's kind of compressed into something smaller and unified into maybe a product engineer role. And that's kind of what's happening within marketing as well. So overall, we will see, and we're already seeing that the roles are collapsing to maybe a full stack marketer. So, what really matters then is your understanding of the product and your taste of how you want to bring that product in front of your customers. And to me, that's not just a separate executive's job. That could be the founder that is talking to a smaller team. Sure, and as the team grows, you'll always have a leader. I don't know if that would be a CMO per se. Very
Yeah.
large companies, sure. But mid to smaller, I see those collapsing into one or two full stack marketers directly reporting into the CEO or maybe even product.
Yeah, I think I hear on the whole product. I think it's a good way of putting it, that whole product engineer. I mean, our team is doing amazing prototypes now just on the product side, and workable, usable prototypes that we can interact with. It's not production ready. It's just compressed all that sort of like thinking time, like what's the usability going to be like? It's a new product or new idea, and it just makes our decision making so much faster and so much better in that sense. And I like the idea of a full stack marketer, like we have a full stack developer. I think, that's quite interesting. So someone who can like cover all the layers of marketing with all the tools that are available. It's really, and one last point, we have a partner, they hit 1 billion ARR and they had no CMO. They just had 3 different marketing departments. And this was pre all the AI tools. I don't know how they did it, but they have a CMO now. But they were running no CMO for a long time, and I'm still quite interested to see or find out from them how they actually got away with that. You've started a new business, right? It's so I'd love to hear a bit about what you're doing. It's called Robyn, is that correct? And just love to find out, what it is, because I think it segues really well with what we've been talking about today.
Yeah, so Robynn.ai. Robin, I named it after the bird, the American robin, which has a orange chest and beautiful turquoise colored eggs. And it heralds spring. So out of snow, it comes out and heralds good luck. And it inherently spreads that goodness across. So it kind of spoke to me when I was thinking about it. But if you look at what's happening right now in software engineering, which is where I've been very close at. And that same thing is happening everywhere else in a slightly more diffused fashion. So, what that is the introduction of agents. Now, earlier it used to be you have a large language model, and then you built out a wrapper around that, and that's your something like a writing tool, AI writing tool, without naming anybody. But now with agents, you can actually give it the tools that you as a marketer have used that works. Things like data for SEO, SEMrush, Ahref, ZoomInfo, those kind of things. Then you can tie this together with your codified way of doing things. Like if I do SEO, I follow a certain pattern. I'll go look for keyword, I'll look for CPC, I'll look for data volume, I look for KD or keyword difficulty. Then I would come up with a list. So the way I do SEO research would be very different from somebody with the exact same tool, same model. So now you have tools and now you have the codified workflow. And then together you put it in a way which is, in a way, personification of what you have learned over the years. So finally, now we are in a place where you can actually do what you have learned in a way that's almost like a, again, joke, like a ghost in the machine. Because when I ask it to do certain things, I can see it using words that's very reminiscent of how I think and I talk about. So what Robyn AI is, think of it as a CMO agent. It's like a Claude code for marketing. The biggest difference though here is that it always remembers your product and your brand and it learns from it every day. So when you wake up in the morning, it's going to say, hey, and I noticed that you're using a comma before and. Do you want me to switch to Oxford English? Or I noticed you're using S instead of a Z. Looks like you're in a, British English. So those kind of things it reflects on based on all the content that gets added to that repository, but also what other team members are doing with AI and talking to them. So if I say, no, 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 I don't like any, this is true story. I don't like any icons about robots, or I don't like these tacky icons about a magic wand or something. And it learns from it and says, okay, I'm never going to use it. Or words like, digital transformation. So that becomes the brand brain or the brand book, as we call it. And then on top of that, there's the main agent, which is the CMO agent, which is always aware. So you could ask it to do things like, hey, what was my campaign like in the last quarter? And go based on that, give me an ABM campaign asset for Nike because we want to run a campaign for that. Or based on that, give me an entire SEO and GEO research so my team can go and write content based on research. So that's the platform. Now, the vision is that in many ways may come across as creepy, headless CMO. And that headless CMO is available to you as your chief of staff or as the lead for your team, which basically is always aware of the product and has all the skills of a CMO to do things in a certain way. So that's what Robynn.ai is. And I founded it in July. And we've been lucky enough to be adding one customer a month. And today,
That's brilliant.
hopefully, we'll add a few more because there's some conversations going on.
And, just like, since we're both software engineers, I'm always interested in sort of the architecture that or the background in terms of how you're doing things. So, I mean, you're not building your own model, right? Using other models and so on. And so how do you sort of get around like under or having that larger memory for these brands?
I'm sure you've heard of OpenClaw, which
Mm,
became such a big thing because people are just running it. It's also a security risk and it runs
yeah.
perpetually and you can talk to it through Telegram, WhatsApp, and whatnot. So if you think about it, it's actually an agent which is running in a loop and is listening to events. So this is what we had built. It's an agent which can use different models for different things. So, for example, Gemini 3 Flash, as of today, is really, really good with summarization for also doing research. Sonnet and Opus from Anthropic is really good for calling tools and staying to the workflow. And then Codex now 5.3x is extremely good at writing code. So the agent that we create actually uses ensemble of models for doing different things. And it has a bunch of different tools for different doing things. And finally, it has a set of rules on how you do certain things. So that kind of becomes a personification of what
Mm,
you would do, if you may say that, but using different models. It's not just tied to Anthropic or
yeah.
OpenAI or whatever is today.
Got it. And then you remember what the relevant sort of things are that you need to pass in through to those models as and when needed. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the piece that as of today, which is context engineering, many would call is the differentiator, may go away tomorrow. So if you think about how you manage that memory, think about us from humans' perspective. We have long-term knowledge, and that kind of defines a personality. And that also includes skills, like I can go and, screw or unscrew because I've learned this as a child, and it's in that long-term knowledge. And then there's short term memory, which is triggered by events, conversations that we are happening right now. And traditionally, and this is where Redis and Single Store, where I worked, I learned was that you store all of that data into a database, and then you do semantic search to pull out whatever is similar, and then you say, this is what their user is looking for. Let me go and find this graph and pull that data. Turns out, more recently, what software engineering found out was if you gave an agent a file system to read and write, its memory is extremely good because when you're talking to it and it becomes very long, it writes it into a file. So the next time you ask it, that becomes its long term knowledge. And so it's just using tools to read and write. And if you now combine it with a database, that becomes a powerful memory system. So that's kind of the overall strategy of how we have built our agents as well to remember
Brilliant.
and then learn and then iterate continuously.
Well, good luck. We hope it goes really well. with your new business.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
And so obviously, just getting back to marketers, I mean, there's a lot of AI tools coming along, as you know, and
Yeah.
it's great you're building one. How can they navigate this? You know, what do you see sort of the mistakes marketing teams are making right now with the use of AI, and well, what are they doing well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's highly opinionated way of thinking, but I feel like for a marketer or anybody looking at AI for marketing should not consider those as a replacement for humans. Because what's happened right now is with AI, we have seen like a flood of quantity over quality. And I was talking to my wife about it. You look like we were both journalists, and you look at any of these articles that come out, they look very professional. You cannot at sometimes even figure out if it's written by human or not. But it's kind of tasteless. It's all sort of word which doesn't have a premise or doesn't have some sort of an opinion associated with it. Can you force it? Sure. But I think that's the 10% that the marketers bring, which should always be there, and which is the differentiation that should be added to whatever marketing or even content that you're doing, right? So that's one mistake. Second, of course, we talked about quantity versus quality. I've seen people just create workflows and blast through all the blogs like one a day, and then not really thinking about whether it's reaching the right audience or not. And the third is, I would say, just the amount of context switching that marketers have to do. We used to do this. I used to do this. It was like you're going to ChatGPT for an outline, you're going to Perplexity for research, then you're going to Gamma to create a deck, then you go to Nano Banana to go and create an image. And so you're kind of like actually trashing a lot more of your context versus really utilizing it in one single place where you're in a flow, and you end up doing something intentional, and you end up doing something that's you know, differentiated, but you have your heart in it. So that's where I feel AI can really help, but not has in many ways. It's a way for maybe a chef to be able to do a lot more creative things by not having to go wash the dishes or not having to go and cut the vegetables. And that should be what AI should do at a mass scale. And that's where I think marketing is different. That's where I think the future is or should be is that 10%, the last mile. That has to
Yeah,
be the chef's kiss.
yeah, it's a story. It's all the creative. I feel like
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of disparate tools, as you said, and I'm like maybe in ChatGPT doing a script, and then I'm in Gamma or whatever doing the slides, and so you jump in, and I use Gemini sometimes to do another version of it. But
Yeah.
that's just me. I'm not even in the marketing team. I think like yeah, at some point it feels like yeah, these products, and there's a lot of different products being developed. I think at some point who's gonna end up being that platform, that marketing platform, like HubSpot was sort of for inbound marketing, if you will? Who's gonna be that platform for marketing? I don't know, creative, just that marketing sort of content engine. It just feels like, yeah, this is a lot of disparate tools right now.
Yeah, I mean that's our vision. The vision is to be able to provide marketers with the tools so that they can do intentional marketing and utilize agents and AI to do whatever is grunt work, but elevate what they actually do better than AI and will do, and bring in that human element and the emotion and the creativity. So hopefully that's where, not to sound arrogant or anything, but hopefully that's
Yeah.
where we end up being in a few years.
Well, if you need a review and approval platform solution, just let us know. We can add that on. Um,
We would love
so
it.
we've just had a new VP marketing started Ziflow, and I always think about, and as we said, there's a lot of turnover of that, the sort of CMO role, etc. Someone starting in that role today in 2026. I mean, it's significantly different, obviously, as if we compare what it was like in even just 2 years ago or 3 years ago. What would your advice be to them in terms of just starting a new position?
Yeah, I would say definitely hands on, use AI and learn to adapt and be curious. So I think one of the big things is things are changing really fast. Like literally in couple of days, the entire stack changes. So you have to, but because of that, it's also now cheaper and easier to go build new stuff if you understand the architecture and the bigger principles. So I would say don't be afraid to go throw away something and then start from scratch because now it's easier and faster to do it. But use those tools. If you are still, I've seen people that are either guilty of using it, they will be like, it doesn't seem right. My boss might think that I'm not needed. Or also, they might feel things like, oh, I'm cheating a little bit, or this is not good enough, right? Both those things are actually not correct. It's shades of gray. So you have to use it as just like any other tool, but realize that it can 10x of what you can do and be honest about it. You don't have to write the entire 3,000 word article, but you have to put the soul, the research, the connectivity, the outline, and the last pieces of adding those words and letters that truly makes it yours. What used to take you maybe a week to do now maybe takes a day. And that's the key difference. But get the hands on the keyboard as well as start using the tools and be adaptable. Those are the things I even tell my children for whatever they're doing right now.
Yeah. I think the other thing, and that's helped me with, like, any content I do, sort of getting advice, getting extra eyes on it. And I think that's what software engineers struggle with. You can produce a lot of code, but the code needs to be reviewed. And everyone's producing more code. So it's actually shifted the problem to that next group who's reviewing. But it's the same with content and decks and marketing content, blog posts. I think it's so easy to generate them and just put it out there without it being reviewed and being like, hey, have someone actually criticize it. And I think if we can, if you can introduce that somehow, somewhere, and have people who are critical and saying, "Hey, is it average, or is it's great?" And just giving you that sort of feedback, I think would help because it is easy. Obviously, the LLMs are all like the writing it reverts to the mean, but you want something that's unique and so on. So I think having that additional human component in that, in critiquing it, I think is something that helps to be introduced into that cycle.
Absolutely. We'd love to collaborate with you and your team as well. Because if you think about how things have evolved in software engineering, is you're right. There was a time in my career where I would just sit and review someone else's code. And at some point, you're like, okay, just hit approve, approve. If it runs into an issue, we'll work it out with the developer who wrote it. And now 90% of that is done by software itself, your agent itself. So Claude writes the code and then it goes into your repo. And prior to that, it catches things that I would catch on the first glance, like security flaw. Is there any type issues? And things like that, your exception handling and things like that. And that should be the case with content as well, in the sense when somebody writes it, does it match back to the same font and the same, logo that we are currently using? Does it have the soul of what our brand is?
Yeah,
Does
the
it have
voice
any
and
grammatical
yeah.
mistake or SEO related? So now when it goes to review, it's a matter of, okay, I see the scores here. Yeah, makes sense. I'll approve it, or no, maybe I'll spend some time on it before I go into it. So absolutely. I think that as more and more of these tools get being used and roles get compressed, love to have a workflow like that for any marketing content that goes out.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I think, just as it's all moving super quick, and I think so. If people want to learn more about Robin, who's your ideal customer actually for Robin?
Yeah, so for us, we have two kinds of customers. One are companies that have used some agency and then they've been very unsatisfied because there are so many different tools and they keep repeating the brand. So any B2B company where you have, some sort of understanding of brand and you want to propagate that for your marketing teams. And then we have also seen a lot of very early startups trying to use it, but they need to also understand the marketing processes and how things are done in a certain way. So for us, we are evolving more towards the former, where it's a team, maybe a smaller, leaner team, and they want to 10x, but they don't necessarily want to just take all the work and give it outside. They still want to have some sort of control over it.
Brilliant. And if they want to find Robin, well, what is the URL? And we'll also include it in the comments.
Yeah, of course. It's Robynn.ai, Roby with a double N, Robin.
Brilliant. Excellent. Well, it was great having you on the pod today. And just going through all the different changes. I think, in 6 months' time, it's going to be interesting to see where we are, and we'll definitely follow Robin, and I hope it all goes well with your new venture.
Absolutely. And thanks again for having me on this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm sharing insights from around the marketing, tech, and operations industries on how marketing and creative teams can get more done together.